Welcome to Audiobook. Tonight we find ourselves in a fog-wrapped English village, the sort of place where legends wake up on purpose, schoolmasters get theatrical, and Hercule Poirot is asked to do the most British thing imaginable. Come to the country and politely debunk a ghost before the village boys break their necks. This is Poirot and the Headless Rider of Brackenby Lane, an original story written by us in homage to Agatha Christie. It borrows her cozy village mood, those tidy motivations, and that gentle touch of comedy that always lurks behind the teacups. But every character, every clue, every reveal and solution you'll hear tonight is entirely our own. It's a Halloween case, which means masks, mist, and just enough eeriness to make you glance at the window while you listen. Question for you tonight. What do you do to celebrate Halloween? Do you decorate, bake, watch old spooky films, read detective stories by candlelight? Tell us in the comments. We read as many as we can, and your answers help us plan next October's mysteries. Creating these tales, the writing, the narration, the sound, and all the little details takes time every week. So, if you enjoy spending your evenings with us, a like, a comment, and a subscribe really do help the channel grow. And if you want to go further, now the lane is misted, the wire is ready, and the rider is coming through. Chapter 1. An invitation to a haunted village. I have often remarked that Hercule Poirot, for all his protests about being a man of logic, has a very human dislike of being left out of things. When England prepares to amuse herself, he says loftily that he is Belgian and above such insular frolics. And yet somehow there he is, faultlessly dressed, watching with the air of a man judging an amateur theater competition. That was precisely the case on the 30th of October, when we found ourselves in the village of Little Brackenby, somewhere between nothing in particular and nowhere at all. We had come at the invitation of Miss Phillida Carstairs, a brisk, rosy, unmarried lady who had once run a girls' school and now ran with even greater severity the affairs of her parish. She had written to Poirot, "We are being plagued by the old headless horseman of Brackenby Lane. It has been seen 3 times in a fortnight. Boys will go out to look on All Hallows' Eve. Someone will be killed. Do come and explain it away." "Explain it away?" Poirot had read aloud, amused. You hear, Hastings? I am invited to be the man who says it is nothing. It is not often that one is engaged to be a spoil sport. "You like being right," I reminded him. "Oh, I like being exact," he corrected. "If, in addition, it removes the fright from the eyes of a lady, then yes, I am content." Miss Carstairs' cottage was exactly what an autumn cottage ought to be. Low, whitewashed with a smoldering fire, a faint smell of apples, and a Labrador who loved everybody too much. She received us in a state of pleasant agitation. "Oh, Muir Poirot, Captain Hastings, I am so relieved. I feared you might not make it before tomorrow night. It is always worse on All Hallows' Eve. The village boys dare each other, and with the fogs." "Come, mademoiselle," said Poirot, setting down his release with ceremony. "You shall tell me the whole story from the first boo to the last ah. We will put it in order. Disorder. It is the accomplice of superstition. It is quite simple," said Miss Carstairs, though she then proceeded to make it quite the reverse. Little Brackenby has had the legend since the Civil War. Sir Oswald Mallory, royalist, hot-tempered, and I dare say rather pleased with himself, was riding home with dispatches. Parliament men lay in wait in what is now Brackenby Lane near the Grange. They cut him down, beheaded him. His horse galloped onto the house with the body still upright. They never found the head. Since then, on certain misty nights, the headless Mallory rides again. Pooh nodded. "A classic of the genre." "Yes, but a classic you tell children," said Miss Carstairs, "not one that actually rides. And yet, in the last fortnight, 3 separate sensible people have seen it. Mr. Bilton, our schoolmaster, Mrs. Amesbury, who visits her sister, and most inconveniently, Mr. Felix Mallory himself, the present owner of Brackenby Grange. The descendant sees the ancestor," murmured Poirot. "It has a poetic symmetry. He was furious, said Miss Cast. He says it makes him ridiculous. He said she looked embarrassed, for she was an essentially proper woman. He said, I will not have my family used as a lantern on a broomstick show. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, so he too suspects artifice. He suspects the village boys, said Miss Castere. But that is the trouble. Tomorrow we'll bring the village boys. They will go and wait in the lane. If some animal comes through at speed, there will be a tragedy. You see why I sent for you. Poirot folded his hands on his knee. He looked very small and very neat beside her capacious armchair. Mademoiselle, I see perfectly. You are less afraid of the dead man without a head than of the living boys without brains. Exactly, she cried, pleased. And these three appearances, Poirot went on. Describe them, if you please, each one. She had prepared notes. Oh, I should have expected no less. First time, Thursday last, heavy fog, between 9 and 10. Mr. Bilton walking home from choir practice. He heard a great drumming of hooves. Then, out of the fog, white or pale horse, dark-cloaked rider, no head, a faint light at the chest. Horse pasted him without slowing. Second time, Sunday. Mrs. Amesbury saw the same thing. Third time, Monday. Mr. Malalary himself was out checking the lower meadow. He swears it went past the hedge at a gallop. Always between 9 and 10, said Poirot. Always in fog, always the old lane. Very regular, our phantom. He keeps office hours, I could not help saying. The light at the chest is curious. A ghost does not require a lamp. Poirot tipped his head at me, approving. Just so, Hastings. A ghost might glow, perhaps. He does not strap on a lantern. Miss Castere shivered. I don't like it. The fog, the river, the use. It's all very... She made a dignified little flustered gesture. Well, very ghastly. We shall walk the lane tomorrow night, said Poirot. We will see what we will see. You aren't afraid? She asked, half teasing. I said, Poirot with utter gravity, am always afraid of the English lane. It is damp, but of headless Malaray. Number. That made her laugh, and the tension in the room eased. But as we went upstairs later to our rooms, we were lodged very comfortably under Miss Caster's eaves. I looked out of the landing window. The afternoon was already sinking. A gray, ground-hugging mist was creeping up from the river and wrapping itself about the hedges like a conspirator's cloak. I felt, foolishly, perhaps, a slight chill. Poirot, I said, supposing, just supposing, it is some sort of animal or runaway horse. Then, mon ami, said Poirot, lighting his candle with maddening calm, we shall stop the horse. And if it is not, he smiled at me over the flame, then we shall be very polite to him. Chapter 2. The Legend, the Grange, and the Money. It is astonishing how in an English village a sensation ripples from door to door faster than wireless. By the time we reached the King's Stirrup, the modest public house by the green, every soul inside knew A, that Missy Puo of London and Belgium had arrived, B, that he meant to catch the headless horseman, and C, that Miss Castere was that set on it you wouldn't believe. The landlord, Mr. Murch, rosy and important, served us with the air of feeding celebrities. Your chocolate, sir, he said to Poirot somewhat doubtfully, and ale for the captain. Poirot accepted it with a nod. You are good, monsieur. Now, since you are at the very center of the web, you shall tell me everything. It did not take much prompting. Villagers love to tell what they have seen, and even more what others have seen. It was proper terrifying, said Mr. Murch. Bilton came in here white as tallow, I tell you, said it went past him like thunder. No head, cloak flying horse, never set a hoof. Wrong hooves muffled, asked Poirot. Mister, the Murch blinked. Now you say it. It sounded loud, but not like on cobbles, more like in a barn. A sound spread by the fog, murmured Poirot. It enlarges. And what of Madame Amesbury? Swears by it, said Mr. Murch. Said she near dropped her basket. And Mr. Malalary. Well, he were in a temper from the start, as if our words had conjured him. Felix Mallory walked in at that moment, tallish, dark, well-dressed for town rather than country, with the ease of someone who has been handsome for quite some time and knows it. He shook the damp from his coat, saw Miss Castaire at a corner table, and came over, eyebrows up. "Ah, so here is our imported ghost catcher." "Imported ghost explainer," corrected Poirot, rising a fraction. "Moo Mallory, I presume. Felix Mallory." He sat uninvited but not unwelcome and called for a whiskey. "I do hope you'll clear this up, Morrow. I can't have my place and my name turned into a postcard for every motorist who gets lost off the Great North Road." "Yet it is your ancestor who rides," said Poirot mildly. Mallory made a face. "If he wants to ride, he can pay the death duties. No, seriously, Sight. These stories stick. I've had London acquaintances already make jokes. Still got your head, Mallory? Don't ride home in the fog." "Mallory, I mean to sell a strip by the river to a dreadful little developer called Chalmers. If he thinks the approach road is a haunted circus, he'll knock 500 off just for the fun of it." "Ah," said Poirot. "There is to be a sale." "There must be," said Mallory frankly. "Brackenby Grange is eating itself. Roof, drains, taxes, and not an heir's in sight. If I flog the river field, I can keep the old place another year. If this nonsense ruins the price, I shall hunt the culprit myself and make him ride headless." He said it lightly, but there was real exasperation there. "And where were you, Major, when you saw the rider?" asked Poirot. "Bottom hedge," said Mallory promptly. "About 4'9", thick as pea soup. I heard it honest. You couldn't miss it. And then it shot past the gap. White horse, cloak, no head. I swore. Then I remembered it was only the old story. Then I swore again because I realized some idiot was doing it on purpose." "You did not follow?" I asked. "In that fog?" "No, thank you. I like my bones not broken." Pooh stirred his chocolate. "Tell me, miss. This developer, Mr. Chalmers, he is eager." "Eager enough," said Mallory, "but he haggles. And if there's a whisper of unlucky lane or dangerous road, he'll use it." "Then you of all men would wish the apparition to stop," said Poirot. "Exactly." At this, Mr. Bilton himself came in, a rather earnest, sandy-haired man with spectacles, and the perpetually worried expression of a schoolmaster whose pupils are inventing new sins. He colored when he saw us. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I hope Miss Cast has not exaggerated my experience. It was quite alarming." Poirot patted the bench. "Come, MC. You saw it the first time. You shall tell us with precision." Bilton sat, gripped his tea, and spoke as if giving evidence. "Fog 9:30 hoofbeats, pale horse, dark figure, shoulders high, no head visible, a dim light at chest level, as though held under the cloak. A smell of—" and here he surprised me. "Paraffin." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Paraffin, you say?" "I believe so. My father kept a lamp." "And excellent," said Poirot. "You observe with the intelligence." Mallory snorted. "Paraffin, a ghost who shops in the ironmonger's." "It is, as I said," Poirot murmured. "This ghost is very modern." When Bilton had gone, Mallory leaned in. "Look here, Miss Poirot. If, as seems likely, this is some amateur dramatics, then catch him tonight, and we can all go back to arguing about the church roof. Will you dine at the Grange with me tomorrow evening?" "Yes," said Pooh. "It will be convenient." "Good. You can see the lane from there, and you can tell Holloway to stop glaring at the fog as though he could arrest it." "Holloway?" I asked. "Our steward," said Mallory. "Been with the family since the flood. He hates anything modern. He even hates fog, though it is as old as the Bible." Poirot looked thoughtful. "A steward who hates change, a master who must sell, and a legend that walks at the opportune time. It is a little drama, this village of yours, monsieur." "Then bring down the curtain," said Mallory, finishing his drink, "before it costs me money." When he had gone, I said, "Do you suspect him?" "Poirot Mallory. He has the horse-riding figure." "Yes, but the motive is wrong. He wishes the ghost to stop. Our phantom monemy serves someone's interest, perhaps not to create the legend. That was, I think, the work of a man with imagination and too much leisure, but to enlarge it, make it more frightening, more talked of. In that enlarging, I smell a second hand. You always want two criminals, I said, half teasing. Poirot wagged a finger. Not always. But when a thing is both theatrical and profitable, it is rarely the work of only one man. And tonight, said Hercule Poirot, rising, we shall go out into the English damp, and we shall pull off the head. Chapter 3. Halloween comes to Brackenby Grange. There are houses that look well in summer, and houses that look well in autumn. Brackenby Grange belonged very firmly to the latter class. Approached through a short yew-lined drive, it had that gray, slightly mournful dignity which makes an English country house appear always to be remembering former glories and former servants, neither of which will ever return. We arrived a little before 8. Holloway, the steward, opened the door. He was exactly what Mallory had promised. Tall, dried out, ironed flat by years of service. The sort of man who believes furniture should be ashamed of collecting dust. He regarded Poirot as though we were there to raise his taxes. Good evening, sir. Mr. Mallory is in the library. Miss Cast has already come. He took our coats with unenthusiastic precision and led us through a hall that bore, I could not help noticing, a number of small, half-hearted Halloween trifles. A turnip lantern on an oak chest, 2 paper bats, some orange ribbons. They looked as out of place there as cocktails in a church. Poirot, who notices everything, let his gaze wander. You do not favor the festival, monsieur, he said pleasantly. Hollow sniffed. Never saw the point of making fun of the dead, sir, nor of frightening children. But it is not the dead who frighten the children, said Poirot. It is the living. In the library we found Felix Mallory by the fire, drink in hand, looking handsomer than was strictly necessary for the country, and Miss Castairs in a chair, knitting with that determined benevolence of a woman determined to be cheerful in a haunted house. Excellent, said Mallory, springing up. Our ghost-busting party is complete. Cook has done a sort of spiced pudding thing in honor of the date. I told her we should properly have brought in an actual head on a charger, but she said it was not nice. Your cook is a woman of taste, said Poirot, smiling. We dined well. Game pie, a good soup, apples baked with brandy, and through it all the conversation went round and round the same alluring subject. Miss Castairs earnestly set out every old story she had ever heard about Sir Oswald, how he had been handsome, how he had gambled, how he had defied Parliament, how his horse had galloped home spattered with blood. Mallory answered with flippant modernity that if Sir Oswald insisted on riding about decapitated, he could at least do it on his own land, and Poirot, twinkling, encouraged them both. But tell me this, he said at last, dabbing delicately at his mustache. Why now? The legend. It is old. Your house, Mr. Mallory. It is old. The lane. It is old. Even the fog, it is old. Why, after 280 years, does Sir Oswald choose this fortnight to ride? For mischief, said Miss Castairs promptly. The devil always does things when it causes the most trouble. For money, said Mallory just as promptly. Somebody wants this place to have a reputation. Bad reputation equals lower price equals easier purchase. You saw Charmer's man in the village, Phillida. Odious person, said Miss Cass, took notes about drainage. Pooh turned to Holloway, who was pouring coffee. And you, Missy, what do you think? Holloway's thin mouth compressed. I think, sir, it was a foolish prank to start, and if the boys go out tonight, one of them will get himself killed. You see, murmured Poirot to me, every one of them fears the consequence, not the ghost. Outside the fog was thickening. By 9 the windows were merely faint silver squares. The world had withdrawn, leaving us and the fire and the ticking clock. Poirot rose. It is time. Mallory stared. You actually mean to go? But certainly if the gentleman rides, he must have an audience. I'll come, said Mallory at once. It's my lane, and if we manage to pull him off his saddle, I should like to explain to him the market value of land. I shall stay here, said Miss Castairs, and pray you don't all break your necks. If you catch him, bring him back and I'll scold him. Hole hesitated. I'll follow with a lantern, sir, he said at last. Lane's bad in fog. Excellent, said Poirot. It is well to have witnesses behind us. A few minutes later we stepped out into the night. The chill was like a sheet against the face. The youths loomed. From the village faintly came the distant pop of boys' fireworks and a wild whoop or two. It was, in short, exactly the sort of Halloween English weather would order for itself. We walked down the drive and into Brackenby Lane. Let me describe it, for it is important. The lane curves gently. On the left, for the first 50 yards, there is a deep ditch and high hedge. On the right, a low old wall. About halfway down, an old willow leans somewhat into the way, creating a natural gate. A little beyond that, on the hedge side, there is a broken section, where once there was a gate into a meadow, now just a gap. It is a narrow place. 2 riders could not easily pass. This, said Poirot softly, is the theatre. That Hastings is the wing where you and Moo Mallory will hide the gap. I will remain by the willow. Mr. Holloway will stay 20 yards back with the lantern. We have thus a corridor. If our rider is of flesh, he will come through it. If he is of spirit, he will not mind. You've done this before, said Mallory, amused despite himself. Tricks. May we? Said Poirot. Ghosts? Not yet. We took our places. Mallory and I crouched in the gap. From there we could see up the pale tunnel of Lane, mist swirling, hedges sweating beads of water. Poirot was a small, dark, patient figure by the willow. Farther back, Holloway's lantern made a soft orange pool. We waited. For a few minutes there was only the wet silence of an autumn night. Then, faintly, I heard it. At first it was like someone beating a carpet at distance. Then it resolved into that unmistakable rhythm. Hoof, 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 coming fast. It's him, whispered Mallory. The lunatic. The sound grew, filled the lane, seemed to bounce off the fog itself, and suddenly there he was. Out of the mist a pale horse, man darkened with damp, eyes bright. Upon it a cloaked figure, shoulders high, cape flying backward, and where the head should have been, nothing, only darkness, and at the breast a dull glow like a shaded lantern. I will say it frankly, for a second, even knowing what I knew, the sight gave me a nasty turn. There is an atavistic part of a man that does not care about rational explanation. It only says, no head wrong, run. The horse thundered past our gap. Mallory swore very quietly. Up ahead Poirot did not run. He stood absolutely still, then flicked his walking stick. I had time to see, lit by the rider's own obscured lantern, a thin wire leap taut across the lane at the height of a man's chest. There was a grunt, a flailing of arms, an indignant, very human curse. The horse plunged, checked. The rider, unbalanced, slid, toppled, and went sideways into the hedge with a glorious, most unspectral thud. Got you, cried Mallory, dashing out. Gently, called Poirot. We do not bruise the ghosts. The horse freed, clattered a few yards on, and stood, sides heaving. I recognized at once the look of an old gray mare, not a spirited charger, but a country animal pushed for one last foolish performance. Holloway's lantern came bobbing. Between us we hauled up the headless horseman. He was no demon. He was no vengeful cavalier. He was, to my enormous astonishment, Mr. Bilton, the schoolmaster. Chapter 4. A Ghost with a Timetable. Bilton, cried Miss Carsters, when we marched him back into the Grange drawing room like a captured highwayman. You, of all people. Bilton's spectacles were askew, his hair full of hedge, his cloak a good piece of theatricals, by the way, lined and weighted, muddy at the hem. The contraption that had hidden his head, a sort of high padded collar with black cloth over it to blur the outline, dangled in his hand. The lantern, which had been strapped to his chest under the cloak, sat on the table, smelling unmistakably of paraffin. He looked in that moment, not terrifying, but deeply embarrassed. I can explain, he said at once. I can explain perfectly. I hope you can, said Mallory grimly. because I have several very strong words to say to any man who risks breaking the necks of boys on my lane." "I never meant it to go so far," said Bilton, flushing. "I meant only to revive the legend." "Revive it?" I exclaimed. "Yes," he said, seizing on the idea like a drowning man on a log. "Little Brackenby is dying, Captain Hastings. The farms let laborers go." He said if the Headless Rider of Brackenby were an active legend that is currently seen, he could bring a party for All Hallows next year. I thought if it was seen credibly by several people, if it was talked of in the pub, it would become real again. Miss Castor put her knitting down with emphasis. "Mr. Bilton, you were going to commercialize Sir Oswald." "I was going to save the village," said Bilton, flushing more. "A little harmless excitement at night in fog." "Harmless," exploded Mallory. "You galloping that old mare down that ditchin' lane." Bilton pushed his spectacles up. "I know the lane, every inch of it." I rode slowly. The fog magnifies the sound. I rapped the hooves. Poirot, who had been listening with his head a little on one side, like a cat to a piano, now tapped the lantern. And this, Mezzy, it was a bold touch. Bilton brightened, poor man, like an actor being complimented on his costume. "Oh yes. You see, the original legend says Sir Oswald's body rode home, not his head. The head was missing, so I thought the light could be the steward's lamp carried home under his arm." "A literary mind," murmured Poirot. "You made a tableau." "Exactly," said Bilton, glad to be understood. "A tableau vivant, and it worked. The villagers saw it, talked. The second time even more sore. And the third time," said Poirot quietly, "someone used you. It was like throwing cold water over them all." Bilton blinked. Mallory stiffened. Miss Castor looked frightened. Holloway in his corner went very still. "Used him?" Mallory repeated. "Yes," said Poirot. "Monsieur Bilton's fantasy. It is foolish, but it is essentially harmless. He chose misty nights. He rode when the village was indoors. He did not want pursuit. Pursuit would unmask him. But on the third night he was seen by Monsieur Mallory, who had not been warned. And the story, instead of being a pretty village joke, became a menace. Children wanted to go out. Housewives became frightened. The vicar's wife asked if the old well should be exorcised. That, I think, is the work of a second man." "Second," said Bilton weakly. Poirot nodded. "Your apparition, monsieur, needed the chorus. Someone who would say in the right ears, 'Yes, it is just as in the old tale. Yes, he rides angry. Yes, it is dangerous to go out.' Someone respected, someone placed, someone who knows the house is in difficulties, and who knows also that if the lane gains a reputation for misfortune, any sale of land will be to the buyer's advantage." His eyes, very bright now, turned quite gently to Holloway. The steward's lips tightened. "That is a serious accusation, sir." "It is a true one," said Poirot. "You said yourself just now, if the boys go out, one will be killed. You have said it in the village. No, you magnified the danger you made of a silly ride a curse." "I was thinking of their safety," said Holloway. "You were thinking," said Poirot, "of forcing Monsieur Mallory's hand." Mallory stared at him. "What?" Poirot spread his hands. "May we— You have been here how long, monsieur?" 42 years, said Holloway stiffly. "You have seen the estate shrink, the repairs postponed, the money wasted. You told yourself this young man, he will never sell until he must. If the lane is thought unlucky, if it is talked of as dangerous, then the value of the riverside will drop. He will have to sell now to Char at once, before it becomes worse. The house will be saved. You wish to save the house, and as you understand it, you are loyal. But the loyalty, it can go astray." Holloway's face worked. "I never rode no horse," he burst out. "No," said Poirot very amiably. "You left the riding to our friend, the schoolmaster. You did the whispering.
And tonight you followed us with your lantern to be a witness again." There was a silence. Then Mallory let out his breath in an angry laugh. "So that was it," he said. "You old wretch! You were going to sell my land for me." "It had to be done," said Hole doggedly. "Place can't go on. You spend in London." "I spend my own money," said Mallory hotly. Hole looked as pained as if Mallory had said he wore his boots in bed. "A Mallory doesn't run the place into the ground." And a steward said, "Mallory doesn't stage manage hauntings to push the price down." Miss Caster's distressed look to Poirot. "Must we make it all a scandal?" Poirot lifted his hands in a small pacifying gesture. "No, no. Tonight is Halloween. It is the festival of masks. We have pulled off 2. That is enough. We will not send M&C Bilton to prison for being theatrical, nor Mr. Hole for being zealous. We will instead agree on a little truth. Miss Bilton will write to his friend in York and say, 'Alas, the legend has been debunked.' The village will laugh. Mia Hole will say loudly that the lane is quite safe. Miss Mallory will make his bargain with Charmers at a fair price, and will keep Monsieur Holloway to see it is wisely used. And Miss Caster will tell everyone it was Hercule Poirot who caught the Headless Horseman, and that they may sleep sound." This delivered with such unassailable cheerfulness was almost impossible to resist. Even Mallory, still flushed, gave in. "You're right," he said, dropping into a chair. "Better a comic story than a sour one. The night we unhorse the Headless Horseman will play better in the pub than the steward and the price of land." "Precisely," said Poirot. "People prefer to laugh." "And you," said Mallory to Bilton, "will never, never gallop that old May in fog again." "Never," said Bilton fervently. "I am most sincerely sorry." "So you should be," said Miss Casters. "But there was kindness in it. And to think I thought you such a sober man." Bilton flushed again. "All schoolmasters," he said with a sort of shy pride, "have a sense of drama. Otherwise the boys win." We all laughed, even Holloway grudgingly. Outside a rocket whistled up and burst green over the village. It seemed to me that Halloween that night had chosen comedy after all. Chapter 5. The morning after, and a stone. Chapter 5. The morning after, and a stone in the porch I thought I confess that was the end of it. We had unmasked the rider. We had uncovered the whisperer. We had prevented the village lads from breaking their legs in a ditch. Poirot had enjoyed himself. I had got damp. Miss Caster had got a story. The world, I thought, was neatly restored to the rational. The world, however, had a small final flourish to make. I came down to breakfast next morning rather later than usual. The damp lane, the excitement, and a very good supper had made me drowsy. I found Miss Caster standing in the hall with her hat on, cheeks pinker than ever, eyes bright with agitation. She pounced. "Captain Hastings, where is Mou Poirot? Still dressing, I imagine. You must fetch him." "No, I shall fetch him." "No, we shall both go. It is most extraordinary." She bustled up the stairs, knocking on Poirot's door before I could announce her. Poirot, immaculate as ever, opened at once. "Mademoiselle, a second haunting." "Something almost as good," she said breathless. "At the church in the porch. Come at once." "Ah," said Poirot, eyes lighting, "a postscript." We went out together into a clearer, paler morning. The mists had gone to sleep in the meadows. The village, after its night of squeals and rockets, looked perfectly innocent again. Only a carved turnip here and there, with a burnt-out candle told of raillery. The church at Little Brackenby was a modest Norman affair, with a squat tower and a lich gate that squeaked. In the porch, set neatly on the worn flags as though placed there for inspection, lay a stone, not a large one, perhaps a foot by 18 inches, moss grown in parts, the edges worn. On the top, faint but visible, was carved a crest, a shield. and above it the unmistakable head and neck of a rearing horse. "The vicar says," whispered Miss Castair, "that it is one of the old Mallory stones from the crypt. He says he has not seen it for 20 years, and now on All Saints' morning, it is here." Poirot bent, hands behind his back, and studied it as though it were a jewel. "Trebia," he said at last. "Someone, having seen us unmask the fraud, wished to restore a little poetry." "You don't think?" I began. "No," said Poirot, straightening. "I do not think that the original Sir Oswald, headless but still considerate, came in the night to return his memorial. I think far more romantically that some villager, a sentimental soul, perhaps one of the lads, perhaps even Monsieur Bilton in repentance, fetched it from wherever it had been stored, and placed it here to say, 'Yes, yes, it was a trick. But let us not quite lose our ghost.'" Miss Castair clasped her hands. "I like that," she said. "I shall tell it that way." "You should," said Poirot. "People like to keep one corner of the house dark." The vicar appeared, anxious and mild. He confirmed that the stone was indeed an old memorial from the Mallory vault removed years ago when the floor was relaid. No, he had not put it there. No, he did not know who had. Yes, it was most curious. And yes, he supposed it might be thought providential. "Providence," murmured Poirot, after we had left, "is very useful in the country. It does the work of common sense." We walked back toward the cottage. On the way, we were hailed from a gate by Mr. Chalmers himself, a dapper townish person with neat boots, and the quick eyes of a man always calculating. "Morning, morning, I hear you unseated the old ghost," he called, grinning. "You hear very quickly, monsieur," said Poirot. "Oh, things travel," said Carus. "Well, that's all to the good. Nasty for prices, those old stories. I'm seeing Mr. Malalary later. Maybe we can come to terms now we know the lane's not cursed." He tipped his hat and went on whistling. "You see," said Poirot softly, "Ole was right about consequences, wrong about the method." "You are very gentle with them," I said. "I am in England, Hastings," said Poirot, "in an English village. If I uproot too much, the whole pretty thing collapses. It is better to prune." We spent the rest of the morning in pleasant idleness. Miss Carstairs insisted on giving us toasted tea cakes to fortify us after our terrible adventure. In the village already the story was changing. Some said the rider had been a poacher in disguise. Some said it had been one of the Mallory grooms playing a trick. One small boy told me with relish that Hercule Poirot had lassoed the ghost. I did not correct him. After luncheon, Poirot retired to our little sitting room with his diary. I know his habit. After an unusual case, even a small comic seasonal one, he likes to set it down, not in the manner of a Alice report, but almost as a reflection. He sat with it open, pen poised, and wrinkled his brow in satisfaction. "Shall you call it the Headless Horseman?" I asked. "Tien," he said. "No, that will make people think of the American story. Ichabod, the schoolmaster who is frightened. Here it is, the schoolmaster who rightens. Much better. Perhaps the affair of the Headless Rider of Brackenby Lane. It has dignity. You'll put in I said that it was on Halloween, but natural element. Chapter 6, Poirot's Reflection. That evening, before we left Little Brackenby, for we were to go back to London by the morning train, Poirot read aloud to me what he had written. I set it down here with his permission, for it seems to me a fitting, close to the whole curious comic, slightly eerie business. October 31st/November 1st. Little Brackenby, a small affair, but instructive. At first sight, a haunting. At second, a theatrical enterprise by a schoolmaster desiring to improve the tourist appeal of his village. At third, and this is the important layer, an attempted exploitation of the same haunting by an old servant, to hasten a necessary financial arrangement. Thus we have imagination built. In fear the villager's interest. It is always, Thus a superstition is born, in poetry spreads in terror, and is fixed by prophet. Why Halloween? Because people expect to be frightened. Therefore they are willing. An audience that has paid to cry will cry. Our English friends, especially in the country, love the thing that is frightful but safe. A headless horseman, who may be seen only between 9 and 10, and only in the lane and only in the fog, is a most accommodating spectre. He looked up at me. You see, I flatter them a little. Do you really think they like to be frightened? I said. But of course, said Pooh. Why else do they tell the story of Sir Oswald to children? Why else do they make the turnip lanterns? They say, "Oh, how terrible!" But they say it in a warm room with friends. They want the pretense of danger. I could not help laughing. You sound almost fond of them. He smiled. They are very endearing.
Your English villagers. They like their mystery to end not with a pistol, but with a scolding. Tonight they will say it was only Mr. Bilton on Old Polly and Mr. Holloway talked too much, and then they will eat cake. Does it not disappoint you? I asked that it was not something stranger. Not at all, said Poirot. If ever I meet a true ghost, Hastings, I shall be polite to him. But I prefer to meet men. They are more complicated. He resumed reading. I observe also that Mr. Malalary, though impatient, is not foolish. He will take the fair price. He will keep Holloway. He will perhaps in future tell him more of his plans, so that Holloway does not take upon himself to play Providence. As for the stone in the church porch, I choose to leave it unexplained. Not because I cannot explain it, but because the village, it will like to say, after all, on the very morning his stone came back. It is good for them to have one event that is not reduced to paraffin and a cloak. He stopped and wagged the pen at me. One must not over-explain Hastings. It makes life flat. Do you really mean, I said, leaning forward, that you could explain the stone? May we, he said, who has access to the church, the vicar, his wife, the Vere, the boys. Who knew we had unmasked the rider, all the village? Who would wish to make it nice after we had made it sensible? Half the village. It is a small thing to carry a stone from the shed to the porch, but to leave it as a mystery. That is kinder. You are getting sentimental, I teased. I am getting old, said Poirot, but his eyes danced. On Halloween, even Hercule Poirot may allow one ghost to walk. Later, as we were packing, I stood again at Miss Caster's casement and looked down the road. The fog of the previous night was gone. The lane lay perfectly ordinary with its hedges, its ditch, its leaning willow. A boy in short trousers was driving a cow along it. A girl on a bicycle passed, singing. It was hard to believe that only a few hours earlier, that narrow ribbon had echoed to a galloping headless rider. Poirot, I said suddenly, if you had not been there, if you had not tripped him, would it have gone on? For a little, he said. Then perhaps someone would have tried to stop it less gently, and the mare would have fallen, and Bilton would have broken a leg, and the story would have become tragic. That is why Miss Cast was wise. She called before the comedy turned to melodrama. Do you suppose, I said, that Bilton will try again next year? Poirot chuckled. Not on a horse. But perhaps, he said, he will organize a lantern walk for the children with suitable historical commentary. He has the temperament. We both laughed. At the gate, when we took our leave, Miss Caster pressed our hands. You have done the village a great service, Mon Poirot. We shall have much to talk of all winter. Then I have succeeded, said Poirot gallantly. For to talk it is the true industry of the English village. As the car took us away, we passed the turn to Brackenby Lane. It lay quiet, harmless, sunlit. And yet I do not know. Perhaps it was the knowledge of the old story. Perhaps it was the sight of that moss-grown stone in the porch. But I could almost imagine in some future autumn, on some mist that rose thicker than usual from the river, a pale horse, a dark cloak, a headless figure going by, not for tourism, not for land deals, not for mischief, but because, as Poirot said, some stories are loathed to die. And for an All Hallows Eve story, meant for telling in the firelight, I do not at all object to leaving it there. And that was Poirot and the Headless Rider of Brackenby Lane. A Halloween story in the best English style where imagination, fear, and self-interest all took turns riding the same old horse until Poirot flicked out a bit of wire and the ghost landed neatly in the hedge. This story was written by us as a friendly homage to Agatha Christie, faithful to her spirit of clear motives, village tensions, and human solutions, but not taken from any of her plots. Tell us in the comments, when did you realize the writer wasn't supernatural? Right away, or only once we reached the lane? Did you catch that someone was using the haunting for leverage over the sale? Which details sold it for you? The paraffin, the muffled hooves, or Holloway's very proper indignation? And again, what do you do to celebrate Halloween? Stay cozy at home, party, take a midnight walk. We'd love ideas for next year's stories. If you'd like to support Audiobook, but honestly, just by listening, liking, and sharing, you're already keeping these mysteries alive. Until our next case, keep your lantern high, your lanes well watched, and your little gray cells warm.